Shwmae a chroeso I Sgwrs, podlediad Consortiwm Canolbarth y De. Yn y podlediad hwn byddwch chi'n clywed y trafodaethau diweddara am bob math o bethau addysg. Hello and welcome to Sgwrs, the Central South Consortium podcast. In this podcast we'll bring you the very latest discussions on all things education.
Hello and welcome to Sgwrs, the podcast series from Central South Consortium. My name is Joanne Nichols and I'm the lead practitioner for science at the Central South Consortium. I'm also the head of science, the leader of learning of science, I should say, at Aberdare Community School. In this podcast episode, we are going to be discussing science literacy across the school. And I'm joined by my colleagues again. We are, as a school in Aberdare, literacy across the school, scientific literacy across the school as well, is something that's been a real focus, a real drive in terms of, and I know we discussed this previously, things like word of the week. So every week, I mean, we start with, in registration time, there is a word that is broken down. So, for example, it was absorption, last week. I think it's culpability this week. But certainly in terms of lots of the specialist words that we would use, heterozygous, homozygous, very much that literacy across the school is broken down into, prefixes. What's the prefix? What does that mean? Where have you seen that before? And right from 7 to 13, this word of the week is discussed, used then across the school throughout the week and discussed, try to get it in as much as we can. But I think certainly, this focus on root words and prefixes is something that we've talked about a lot with our classes. And I'd be interested to know how you promote scientific literacy across the school. Paul, could we start with you?
Unlike you, Joe, we haven't as of yet introduced a science literacy across the school strategy. But although we have introduced, if I can move the topic to numeracy a little bit, but it does encompass literacy as well, because we're trying to encourage common approaches to graph work. I think this fits in with this podcast. So we have introduced, it's nothing new, SMALT, and we encourage, we work with the maths department, we work with the technology department, geography department, so that whenever graphs are done in those lessons, the students use the same approaches so they can transfer those skills. So although it's a numeracy approach, the literacy aspect of it is understanding the terms used when describing or when drawing a graph. So SMALT stands for, the S stands for the scale, the M stands for most of the page, the A is the axis, the L is label, and T is the title. So they are developing the same approaches across the different subjects. And then when it comes to, we try and introduce common language when we're describing the graph and describing relationships on the graph. So that's the approach we've taken so far. So although it's numeracy focused, there is a literacy aspect to it as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. We do that across the school as well. What I should say is that the literacy across the school, the word of the week is whole school, and that's driven by the English department. But there's that focus sometimes on the word would be scientific. But we do something similar as well to you. We use salute as an acronym to draw graphs. I can see Hannah's nodding there. And that's something, again, like you've mentioned there, Paul, that language, isn't it, of science, or that language of a particular skill like graph drawing is something that, geography, technology, the maths department very much so have we've driven that with them, and salute is scales, axis, labels, units, title, and any extras. Extras is like the line of best fit or a key. But, you know, whole school, it's so important, isn't it? You know, and particularly, you know, as you know, Bethan, you mentioned earlier on about genetics and Punnett squares and, you know, the specialised language that's in that topic, homozygous, heterozygous. And again, it's, you know, it's saying to them, where have you heard, you know, those similar sounds? Have you, you know, looking at prefixes to words or suffixes and really focusing on that. Beth, I don't know what your experience has been there.
I've been really lucky this year, actually. I'm part of a whole school teaching and learning initiative that's all to do with putting out whole school literacy. So it's not necessarily scientific whole school literacy, but it is whole school. And we've been looking at etymology, so like root words and where they come from. And so I've been trying to build these in as like starters activities throughout my lessons. I did a nice one to do with series circuits not so long ago, and the root word was Ceres or Ceres. My Latin pronunciation is dodgy, but it meant to link or to chain, and then we linked that into how a series circuit is a nice chain, and it's all one after the other after the other. We've also looked at morphology, which was your root words, so your prefixes, your suffixes, and your base bit in the middle. And we've been doing Under the Sea or Planet Lass with year 7, and so we did submarine. So we had your prefix of sub, and we got them to list other words that began with sub, and then mar, and then we had a whole bunch of sort of marine, I can't remember what else went in there, but anything that had that base bit of mar in there, and then any words ending in "een", and we linked of how this word has sort of formed and evolved. We've also had a look at sort of word families, but then that sort of linked into the morphology, where anything with a similar sort of prefix, so like your homozygous and what was I doing the other day? I was talking to the applied and I can't remember. Oh, it doesn't matter. But it was along the same sort of lines and just linking of, no, come on, we know this. Oh, so we were doing covalent bonding. And I was like, cohabit, coexist, they're together, And they were like, oh, yeah. And just little things like that. Another one that's been quite nice is the Freya model. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but you like split the page into 4. And you put a definition in the top corner, then a diagram or some kind of visual representation in the top right-hand corner, and then similar words in the bottom left and opposite words the bottom right, which is really difficult to come up with opposite words. Like we did orbits with year 8, and so I gave them, the definition was a curved path in space followed by an object going round a larger object, and then they had to sort of rewrite it in their own words that made sense to them. Then we had a diagram of a circular orbit and an elliptical orbit, and then our sort of like things were the moon, Earth, the Earth and the sun, a comet and the sun, and then our opposite ones, it was like, that's really hard to think about, but we went on the path of sort of rotation and how day and night isn't an orbit because it's a rotation, or like anything spinning isn't necessarily an orbit, it needs to be two bodies, one going around another, and things like that. And all my examples now are very science specific, but we're rolling this out across the whole school where every department is sort of taking it on board and doing their own sort of things, just to get the learners sort of thinking about, oh yeah, that word begins with this thing, that links to what I've been doing over there, and realising that language is this massive spider's web that we need to untangle.
Yeah, and I think we're not just talking about the meaning of words, are we? Because I think the other thing that we've mentioned very much in all these episodes is the skill of literacy, and very much as a whole school focus. We've looked at, and we were guilty of mentioning it in a previous episode, particularly in science, that we will often accept one-word answers. I think that that's something as a school, I think both orally, we sometimes would accept that as teachers, wouldn't we? I don't just mean science colleagues. Whereas there is this encouragement now, I think, which is so important to write in full sentences, but also to speak in full sentences as well. Because I think, again, you know, we accept a response, it's right, we go, oh, yes, they understand, and we move on. But again, I think that skill of writing in full sentences, that drafting and redrafting that we spoke about, that maybe our English colleagues are a lot more familiar with than us, you know, that sharing a good practice, like you said, Beth, and you're part of a whole school teaching and learning group. We have TLCs as well ourselves, where we share good practice across the department. And I think that, you know, so many of our questions now in our examinations are not just 1-mark questions, are there? It's about that encouragement of writing in a full sentence answer, you know, this is the answer because of this, you know, and this is the reason. And you know, often when you're talking to the pupils, this question is worth 2. Right, what are you going to say for the 2nd mark then, isn't it? You know, so it's not just about this. It, of course, is familiarity with language, but it is also the skill, isn't it, of literacy and, you know, speaking and writing in full sentence answers as well, I think, you know, which is got to be a whole school drive, hasn't it? Dale?
Yeah, just picking up on that, I remember a few years ago we did, with the challenge advisor, did a bit of work whole school with sort of learning walks and just wandering around and popping into other departments' classrooms, which was nice if you were the one walking around. I know it can be a bit daunting for colleagues when people are popping in. But one of the main takeaways that I got from it was seeing the same class in English or in geography writing loads. And I was like, you never write that much in my lesson. So the next time they came to my lesson, they wrote a lot more than they did normally, because I know they can do it. And maybe I was guilty of, like you say, accepting that 1-word answer, kind of jumping on it and not really pushing them to write in that expanded sort of structure.
Yeah, and I think it's moving away from that, isn't it? And I think absolutely, you know, there's nothing like, you know, they were talking about literacy across the school in this episode. You know, there's nothing like going to see, within the realms of what's allowed, to see other colleagues and pop in and out, especially if you've got this open door kind of policy, and see what they're writing, almost doing like a pupil trail. And it's staggering, really, isn't it? You know, the skills that they possess. And I think definitely for us in science, that's something that we need to move towards now, is that, maybe improving our questioning techniques as well, you know, our skill set, to get more out of them, you know, what do you mean by that? Or you know, and to keep encouraging that dialogue. Hannah?
I just wanted to talk about Mountain Ash, because as a whole school, we've got accelerated readers, and we've got a bank of scientific resources in the accelerated reader scheme, and the pupils are actually expected to read the books and then carry out a comprehension at the end of it. And as I said, there are scientific ones as well as whole school books. And that seems to have really pushed the reading skills of our pupils. You've spoken about questioning. We've got a whole school push this year on questioning. And again, we bounce the questions back, so we're not accepting 1-word answers. And if somebody, if one of the pupils gives an answer with a scientific term, we're encouraged to say, what does that term mean? And to another pupil, so we're bouncing the questions back and forth. And then at a third point, one of the strategies we've picked up from the languages department is we've encouraged our pupils to do slow writing. And here we've got a scaffold to answer things like graphs. What do graphs tell us with the slow writing? What do the results tables tell us? And it's a scaffold that encourages pupils to write whole sentences on each point. And there's around about 8 points in that slow writing.
Yeah. Paul, what's What's your experience been about this across the school?
Well, I just wanted to I was going to make the point, and Hannah has just made it really, something you said, developing the pupils' oracy to help with their literacy, because, a lot of my pupils are very keen to speak most of the time, but when you ask them a scientific question, they seem to become, unable to produce a coherent response. So developing the question, their thought process orally, and then you can reiterate to them, well, if you can tell me that, there's no reason why you can't write that down. You've just expressed a very good answer that would gain you 2 marks in an exam question, if you wrote that down. So I think that's part of the key, is talking to the pupils and getting them to verbalize their thoughts and helping them to understand and modeling that for them also. Yeah,
I think we picked something up recently. We have these TLCs, where we all share good practice. And one of the things that we found, and they can be easy gains, can't they, Paul, that kind of thing. We shared some practice with the English department, or STOL to use your previous term, where they do a little starter activity called See, Wonder, Infer, where they would look at an image and you say to the pupils, can you tell me what you see? Nothing else, tell me what you see, what you wonder, what you infer. And then I started a unit with my year 8 on, we're doing about, the body, and it was about organ donation. And, what can you see? I can see a boy attached to a machine. What do you wonder? I wonder what's wrong with him. What do you infer? He looks really fed up. Maybe he's waiting for a transplant. Maybe he's really ill. And just some little starters like that can start that discussion, can't it? Because absolutely it's oracy as well as literacy. And, those strategies then to get them thinking about what's going on. And again, it's sharing that good practice, stealing those little easy gains from our colleagues, because again, we've said quite a lot through these episodes. It's what works for you in your school, and is what is working there is obviously been a success, and then sharing that good practice. Dale?
Yeah, that sounds similar to something we did a few years ago, which it was through Pixel, I think, but it was Thinking Hard, if anyone's heard of that, which, like, transforming things was a big part of it, turning a text into an image, or the other way around, or condensing. I think one of the things was a 66-word grid, so you had a 66-word box, and they have to try and summarize something in that, and the goal is to get exactly 66 words, which, they actually quite enjoy the challenge then, and they really get some good stuff in there. Even when someone, myself, accidentally does a 55-word grid. But there we go. They still work. They did the right thing. But they, that sort of thing, just transforming it and building up their confidence that way. So you're giving them a kind of framework to work in. And that was something that was started off whole school. And we've carried on using bits of it to improve that kind of literacy.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things, very much, isn't it, is that there's such a lot of good practice going on out there, within schools and across schools as well, and I think a podcast like this can be used to kind of generate that level of literacy, can't it? No, I hadn't thought about that, or I'd forgotten about that. Like you said, Dale, we were a Pixel school, and the Pixel resources are great. That's something that, we used it a few years ago, and it's something maybe that we could bring back, so I think that's excellent. So some good strategies there for whole school literacy, scientific literacy, and whole school as well. Thank you very much.
Diolch am wrando ar y bennod hon o Sgwrs. Cofiwch ein dilyn ar Twitter a Facebook, tanysgrifio ein sianel YouTube, ymuno yn cymunedau ar ein gwefan a darllen ein bwletin ysgolion wythnosol am y newyddion diweddaraf. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sgwrs. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our online communities via our website, and read our weekly school bulletin for the latest news. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now.